and 30 seconds. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 8 minutes. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 7 minutes and 30 seconds. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 7 minutes. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 6 minutes and 30 seconds. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 6 minutes. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 5 minutes and 30 seconds.
Welcome to Ronco's Weekly Music.
The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 5 minutes.
Each day through my window, I watch her as she passes by. I say to myself, you're such a lucky guy.
The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 4 minutes and 30 seconds.
It's truly a dream come true. Out of all the fellas in the world, she belongs to you. But it was just my imagination running away with me.
The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 4 minutes.
Running away. Soon we'll be married and raise a family. Oh, yeah. A cozy little home out in the country
The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 3 minutes and 30 seconds.
This couldn't be a dream, or too real it all seems. But it was just my imagination once again.
The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 3 minutes.
Tell you it was just my imagination running away. Every night on my knees I pray, dear Lord, hear my plea.
The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 2 minutes and 30 seconds.
When arms enfold me, I hear a tender rhapsody, but in reality, she doesn't even know me. Just my imagination once again.
The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 2 minutes.
Just my imagination. Just my imagination. Running away with me. Just my imagination.
The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 1 minute and 30 seconds.
Oh, and I'm the type of guy who will never settle down. Where pretty girls are, well, you know that I'm around. I kiss them and I love them, cause to me they're all the same. I hug them and I squeeze them. They don't
The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return in 1 minute. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 45 seconds.
I tear open my shirt and I show a rosy on my chest, cause I'm a wanderer.
The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 30 seconds.
Okay, have a good show, everyone.
The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 15 seconds. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 5 seconds.
He's not just a conservative voice at CNN. He's the last man standing athwart the leftist mob, delivering the fiery truth, surrounded, outnumbered, still undefeated. Fighting for free speech, Western civilization, and delivering common sense for the American people. Ladies and gentlemen, here's Scott Jennings.
It's Monday, October the 13th. Indeed, a great day for Western civilization and those of us who fight for it every single day. Historic for the people of Israel. October the 7th has finally come to a long end after more than 2 years. The nightmare for 20 families is over. 20 living hostages returned to Israel this morning. There are no more living hostages in Hamas captivity. U.S. President Donald Trump in the region hailing the dawn of a new Middle East in remarks to the Israeli Knesset today. And later, he joined regional leaders to sign a Gaza ceasefire deal during the meeting they held in Egypt. He's now about to leave the region, but he made these remarks before he left.
This is the day that people across the region and around the world have been working, striving, hoping, and praying for. They have done things over the last month that I think were really unthinkable. Nobody thought this could happen. With the historic agreement we've just signed, those prayers of millions have finally been answered. As you know, the hostages have been returned.
Emotional scenes unfolded as the freed hostages reunited with their families in hospitals across Israel. At 33 minutes past the hour today, Yael Bar-Tur, host of the Ask a Jew podcast, joins us live from Israel. She has been on the ground the last few days and is there as the hostages were being released. And to react to the historic breaking news, we welcome to the Scott Jennings Show the House Majority Floor Leader, Steve Scalise, who represents Louisiana's 1st District in Congress. Leader Scalise, thank you so much for the time today. And I just want to start with your reaction to the incredible scenes playing out on our television screens today.
Well, Scott, thanks for having me. And what an historic day. It's not just an historic day for Israel. It's an historic day for the whole world, anybody who wants peace. And for all of those who for decades have tried to achieve peace in the Middle East and have not been able to be successful, Donald Trump proved once again just how amazing he is. As you know, he's the peace president, Scott. Donald Trump did what very few leaders throughout time have been able to do, is to use strength through power, get peace through power and strength. The old Reagan doctrine of peace through strength. He's kept the terrorists at bay. I mean, Hamas invaded Israel on October 7th, 2 years ago. We've seen the barbaric attacks that Hamas, backed by Israel, backed by Iran, and then of course Israel had to go defend themselves, and they did. Prime Minister Netanyahu's done an amazing job under incredibly difficult circumstances, but ultimately asked President Trump for help for the final piece, which was after Israel decimated Iran's capabilities for their anti-aircraft, for Trump to come in and use those B-2 bombers to take out Iran's nuclear capabilities, which Biden and even going back to Obama let them develop. Iran was developing a nuclear weapon, which would have been a terror threat to the entire world, surely to all of our Middle Eastern allies in the region. And it was President Trump who stepped up and said, we're not going to let this happen. We're going to stand up to the bullies around the world. And I think all bullies around the world are on notice. And so, yes, he's bringing peace to the Middle East, but Putin better be on notice. Xi better be on notice in China. This is a president you don't mess with.
Israel's ultimate goal, now that they have their hostages home, shifts to removing Hamas from power and ultimately demilitarizing Gaza, de-radicalizing some of these folks. Are you hopeful that this can take place in accordance with the president's 20-point peace plan? And are we prepared as a free world for what happens if Hamas simply cannot bring themselves to hold up their end of the deal?
We all need to trust but verify. I mean, Hamas is a terrorist organization that's proven they can't be trusted. But whoever is going to be established as the leadership of Gaza, and all the world's nations need to come together and help rebuild Gaza. I know that's part of what was being discussed in Egypt today, and it's going to be an ongoing process. It shouldn't just rest on Israel, but when they rebuild Gaza, it's got to be a different leadership structure. You can't have a terrorist organization that takes the money, literally starves the Palestinian people. And remember, it was Hamas that was starving the Palestinian people, taking that, selling the food to build tunnels and to create terrorist networks to go kill Jews. That has to end. And everybody needs to watch closely to make sure it ends. Iran has to get out of the business of being a state sponsor of terrorism. If they want to get a recognized economy again, their nuclear program it was set back, but to sell oil on the world markets, you're seeing more pressure by the United States and other countries putting pressure on Iran. In any country that does business with Iran and buys their oil, the only product they have to make billions of dollars a month is oil. And Biden opened up the door, allowed them to sell their oil on world markets. They used that money for terror. President Trump's been cutting that off and also making America energy independent. So all of that is tied together. And hopefully we see other countries stepping up and doing their part as well.
Billions upon billions of dollars from around the world had gone into Gaza over the last several years. And of course, we know what Hamas did with that money. They used it to build the terror tunnels and prepare for what they did on October the 7th. There's now going to be an effort to rebuild Gaza again. How do we guarantee that U.S. tax dollars and money from around the world doesn't wind up back in the same hands of the people who used it for nefarious purposes before?
Well, number one is you have to see who is going to be selected and elected as the leadership. The people there elected a terrorist organization to run Gaza. That can never be allowed to happen again. And it starts there. And so who's going to be controlling the money? You always follow the money. And, the world wants to help, but you don't pour money into a terrorist organization. So it's going to start there. And, the world, the other countries of the world need to be involved too. All of these European countries that looked down on President Trump and criticized his actions, none of them achieved peace. It was President Trump who achieved peace because he was willing to stand up to the bad guys when everybody else was appeasing Iran, was letting them get a nuclear weapon. John Kerry, you remember him over and over again flying to all of these countries in Europe talking about letting Iran get a nuclear weapon so that maybe they'll just be a good actor in the region. Well, all they did was terrorized everybody. And then they were able to sell their oil because those administrations, Obama and Biden, let them conduct commerce again, sell energy, which ultimately is what they use to funnel and fuel their terrorist proxies.
That's House Majority Floor Leader Steve Scalise of Louisiana. More with Leader Scalise in just a second here on the Scott Jennings Show. First, a word from our friends at Americans for Free Markets. Under Obama and Biden, their regulators pressured banks to close accounts for people they didn't like. It was called debanking. It trampled on many people's freedoms. President Trump has taken decisive action to put a stop to that. He's got an executive order on it, calling out those regulators. But lasting reform requires Congress to act. Americans for Free Markets thanks the president. Now they want him and Congress to work together to bring final clarity, consistency, and long overdue accountability to financial regulation, to get involved in the effort to stop once and for all the practice of debanking. Go to forfreemarkets.com. That's forfreemarkets.com. Learn how you can get your voice involved on this and call on Congress to ensure that debanking and that abuse of power, like we saw under Obama and Biden, can never happen again. More with House Majority Floor Leader Steve Scalise when we return, plus a live report from Israel later. It's Scott Jennings on Salem Radio Network.
Straight talk without the bluster. When you positively need the truth, this is where you come.
If I come out like a dream, will you let me show you what I mean?
Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 4 minutes.
All I want is a remedy for all of the things that will be. Ooh, I will take a look. Please.
Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 3 minutes and 30 seconds.
Baby, baby, why you dye your hair? Why you always keep with your mother's hair?
The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 3 minutes.
Tell me, did the other troubles going on you? If I come on like a dream, ooh, will you let me show you what I mean? Will you let me come?
The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 2 minutes and 30 seconds.
All I want is a remedy for all of the things that we need. I would totally take a note to please.
The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 2 minutes. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 1 minute and 30 seconds.
I need a remedy, yeah, for what is ailing me, you see. I need a remedy for what is ailing me. I need a remedy, yeah, for what's ailing me. If I only had a remedy, you
The
see.
Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return in 1 minute. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 45 seconds. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 30 seconds. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 15 seconds. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 5 seconds.
Fighting for free speech and Western civilization. This is the Scott Jennings Show.
It's Monday, October the 13th. It's Columbus Day. It's a historic day here on the Salem Radio Network as we celebrate the return of the hostages to Israel from Gaza, and we celebrate President Trump signing a historic peace deal in the region. He's about to head back to the United States. Our special guest on the show today is the House Republican Majority Floor Leader, Steve Scalise of Louisiana. We're going to turn our attention to the government shutdown, Leader Scalise. We're in day 13 of this Democrat-induced shutdown. Speaker Johnson said today it could be one of the longest in history if the Democrats don't come to their senses. What's the latest in the Capitol? Is there any light at the end of this tunnel for all the millions of Americans who are being hurt by this Democrat shutdown?
Well, Scott, the shutdown is causing harm on real people. I mean, military troops are not going to get their paychecks, so other federal employees either. But Democrats that are shutting the government down don't care. All they're concerned about is appeasing the most far-left Marxist wing of their party. And you can see it. Chuck Schumer, you go back to March. Democrats like Chuck Schumer voted for these very same funding levels in March, and then they got eviscerated by the Marxists who just hate President Trump. And they just want to see the Democrat Party fighting Donald Trump on everything. They won't even celebrate today the release of the hostages because they hate the fact that there's President Trump who did it. What twisted sense of a party are they that they celebrate only the failure of America, not the success? And so they're shutting the country down just because they don't like the results of the election last year. And so, they filed, by the way, an alternative bill of $1.5 trillion in new spending, a wish list of crazy things like funding healthcare for illegals. That's in Chuck Schumer's alternative bill. Then, that'll appease the far left. Most Americans think that that's insanity, that you would shut down the government and deny military men and women in uniform sacrificing their lives for our freedom because you want to give taxpayer-funded healthcare to people here illegally. That's why they're shutting the government down.
Leader Scalise, I want to ask you about another topic, and that is the uptick in left radical political violence. We've seen it happening all over the country, from our friend Charlie Kirk to the attack on ICE agents to this Looney Tunes who's running for Attorney General in Virginia. You yourself experienced this firsthand some years ago. I'm wondering how you're feeling about this as you watch it unfold now, this rising tide of radical left political violence in the country. What are we going to do about this as a nation? It is becoming quite unsafe out there among some populations where leftist radicals are really taking matters into their own hands. They've left speech and debate behind, and they're taking up arms against their fellow Americans.
Scott, it's alarming, and you can see more and more on the left, they're almost normalizing this violent rhetoric. I mean, you look in Virginia where they have a guy running for Attorney General who literally advocated and talked about the murder of his political opponent. And there are no Democrats in Virginia denouncing him or unendorsing him. He's been endorsed by pretty much every Democrat, including their candidate for governor, and she won't even unendorse him after these comments came to light. And so what does that tell you about the Democrat Party, that they think that this is okay, especially after Charlie Kirk's assassination by a leftist who was hearing all of this rhetoric about Trump's a Nazi, Trump's this and that and the other. They say it over and over again. And the left media, the mainstream media just allows this to go on. If Republicans had said things like that, and then that was used by somebody on the right to go and try to kill somebody, everybody would be denounced for it. And so it's got to be called out every time you see it, and it can't be tolerated. Look, I'll be at the White House tomorrow with President Trump. Look at what he's doing in the Middle East. He's going to be back in Washington tomorrow, back at work. For those of us that want Washington to work for the country, President Trump's going to be posthumously, unfortunately, issuing the Medal of Freedom to Charlie Kirk at a White House ceremony. And it's a shame it's not Charlie there in person receiving it, because he surely deserves it. But I appreciate that President Trump is paying that tribute to Charlie and his family for what Charlie did to create a movement to inspire young people.
Yep.
And you can see it at turning point chapters all across the country, places where they don't even have turning point chapters, where thousands and tens of thousands of young people say, I want to start a turning point chapter at my high school or my college because I don't want to be shut down by the left.
That's the House Majority Floor Leader, Steve Scalise. He's Congressman from Louisiana. Leader Scalise, we thank you for your time today. We wish you all the best in dealing with the Democrats in Washington, and we hope you can find an end to the shutdown. And we're very grateful for your service to our nation. When we come back, we're going to get a report live from Israel. My friend Yael Bar-Tur is on the ground, and we're celebrating the return of the hostages. It's the Scott Jennings Show here on the Salem Radio Network.
Portions of the Scott Jennings Show are sponsored in part by Americans for Prosperity.
Deepest of covers.
The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 5 minutes.
I've been run down, I've been lied to, and I don't know why I let that mean woman make me a fool. She took all my money.
The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 4 minutes and 30 seconds.
Now she's with one of my good time buddies. They're drinking in some crosstown bar. Sometimes I feel like I've been tied to the whipping post.
The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 4 minutes.
I feel like I'm dying.
The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 3 minutes and 30 seconds.
My friends tell me that I've been such a fool.
The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 3 minutes.
Oh, for loving you. Drown myself in sorrow as I look at what you've done. But nothing seems to change. The bad times stay the same, and I can't run. Sometimes I feel.
The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 2 minutes and 30 seconds.
Good Lord, I feel like I'm dying.
The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 2 minutes. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 1 minute and 30 seconds. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return in 1 minute. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 45 seconds. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 30 seconds. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 15 seconds. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 5 seconds.
justice in the American way. Look up in the sky. It's a bird. It's a plane. It's the Scott Jennings Show.
Monday, October the 13th, we're delivering common sense to the American people on a historic day, a monumental day. President Trump is in the Middle East. The hostages are home. Let's hear from the president right now.
This is not only the end of a war. This is the end of an age of terror and death and the beginning of the age of faith and hope and of God. It's the start of a grand concord and lasting harmony for Israel and all the nations of what will soon be a truly magnificent region. I believe that so strongly. This is the historic dawn of a new Middle East.
That's President Trump speaking just after signing the peace agreement documents with other regional leaders at the summit in Egypt. We are getting a live report from on the ground in Israel in just a moment from my friend Yael Bar-Tur, who's been over there for the last few days. But first, I do want to share with you a story from a new sponsor of the Scott Jennings Show. The sponsor is called Child Help. I'm very honored to have them to be part of the program. Here's the story. Rebecca Baptiste, little girl, was just 10 years old, bright, full of life, and ready for the 5th grade. But despite 12 reports of suspected abuse, Rebecca died at the hands of people who should have protected her. Tragically, she's not alone. Every day in America, 6 children die from abuse or neglect. And that's why I am partnering with Child Help, an amazing organization fighting to end child abuse and help children in crisis. For just $135, you can provide 5 children access to Child Help's 24/7 hotline, text, and chat counseling, connecting them with trained crisis counselors who can make the difference between life and death. Here's what I want you to do. Please visit scottjenningsshow.com and click on the Child Help banner and make that $135 donation today. Go to scottjenningsshow.com, click the banner, and help Child Help protect America's children. It's Scott Jennings with you here on the Salem Radio Network. With us now is Yael Bar-Tur, host of the Ask a Jew podcast. She is an alum of the Harvard Kennedy School of Government. She is the former head of digital communications of the New York Police Department, and she is in Israel for this historic moment. Yael, thanks for being with us today. You were born and raised in Israel, and you and I have had many talks about this over the last several months. You're there on the ground as history is made, as the hostages have returned today. When you saw those first images early this morning, what was your emotional reaction to that?
First of all, it's been an incredibly emotional day here in Israel. I don't think anybody got a wink of sleep last night. I, like many other people, at around 6 a.m., was already in Hostage Square, and there were a few hundred people, later a few thousand people, just all standing together, strangers, watching these images on the news and hearing the updates. And it was just electric. You could hear the collective national sigh of relief in the air.
You were in Hostage Square on Saturday in Tel Aviv.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen the video here in the United States of Ambassador Witkoff talking to the crowd. And, you know, a lot of people there, a lot of boos, a lot of cheers. What was it like to be in that crowd? Give us a sense of the sort of the crowd dynamics there.
Let me tell you, Scott, you'd think you were at a MAGA rally. It was pretty crazy and amazing. So many American flags. So much love and support for the American people and gratitude for President Trump. And this is not necessarily a right-leaning crowd. You know, a lot of people in the crowd, as you probably know, are not fans of Prime Minister Netanyahu. But I think every single person in this country, left and right, can really agree on one thing, that we are eternally grateful for President Trump for moving this deal forward, for the support of the American military. You know, there's not a kid in Israel that doesn't know what CENTCOM is, for example. You know, the support and gratitude for the American people and for the president is something that will really, I think, be part of the history books here.
Yeah, the imagery coming out of Israel is amazing. From the front page of the Jerusalem Post today with President Trump's picture on it, and it says the peacemaker. You see makeshift images of the president. You know, I've seen something stretched out on a beach. I've seen posters, people holding signs. You know, you were born in Israel. You live in the United States. I mean, you really are, you know, part of the community of both countries. What's it feel like to be there and just see an American president lifted up the way he is by the Israeli people?
Yeah, you know, growing up here in Israel, I always saw America and Israel's interest as completely intertwined and aligned. I mean, for us, the American people feel like our distant cousins. And, you know, we all believe in similar values of freedom and humanity. So it was just incredibly rewarding seeing these two cultures come together. And, you know, we're a very small country. We're aware of our limitations. We're a strong country. We have a lot of capabilities, but we know we can't do this alone. So this, you know, the support really meant the world. And I think this probably couldn't have happened without President Trump and without the help of the U.S. military.
You've been volunteering with some of the hostage families over the last 2 years. I cannot begin to imagine the emotion of today for them, for you. It's just overwhelming, I imagine. Have you been in touch with the families that you've been volunteering with over the last several months?
Yeah. I mean, we talk every day. You know, I posted for them today. I think, you know, it's so surreal here to see these images of these hostages coming home. We're a very small country. We all know each other. We all know these hostages. We know their parents. We know their children. We know their hobbies. We know everything about them. So it really does feel like family. And I think that the moment it hit me today personally, I volunteer with the wife of Omri Milan, who is a 48-year-old hostage, 2 little girls. And this WhatsApp group that I've been a part of for the last 2 years of all of us, when they changed, his brother-in-law changed the name of the group today from Bring Omri Home to Omri is Home. You know, that's when the waterworks started for me personally.
Yeah, I met over the summer in Israel, Alon Ohel's mother, Edith, and meeting her then and remembering just how shattered she was over the summer, and then seeing images of Alon with his family and his mother today and how happy they looked and how excited. I saw a video of how excited they were when they got the word that he was back with the IDF. It was I felt the same way. I mean, I'm sitting over here, you know, thousands of miles away, and I couldn't contain myself either. So I'm really proud for you to have experienced that with these families. Let me ask you a question.
And regarding Alon, sorry,
please,
I just want
to
share with you a little tidbit about Alon. I was at Billington Hospital today, where he was transferred to, and he's a pianist, as you know, and they actually set up a piano for him in his room, in his hospital room. So I'm hoping he's putting that to good use already.
I think I saw a message from his mom that said he had played the piano already. I have worried so much about him because, you know, his eye was injured in the attack on October the 7th. He obviously wasn't treated. I know he's blind in one eye and his other eye may be injured as well. But to hear that he sat down at a piano today was a really, really special bit of news. Yale, the president today said that phase 2 of the Gaza peace plan negotiations have begun. There's a lot of talk about a new dawn for the Middle East, peace in the Middle East. Is it, you've been among the Israelis the last few days. Do they share the president's optimism? Obviously, everybody's happy to get the hostages home. Is that optimism of the president shared that we may, in fact, have a period of peace here and that there may be, something new and better on the horizon for the region?
So in typical Israeli fashion, I'll give you an answer that contradicts itself.
Okay.
Yes, there is intense, huge optimism in the air. It really feels like, you know, we've seen hostage releases before, but it was always with a heavy heart because we knew there were so many people waiting. And even now, you know, there are still 24 hostages that are deceased, unfortunately, still waiting to come back. But today it really did feel like you could see the light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak. I think there's a lot of optimism in the air, but with that, we know our enemy. We know what they're capable of. We know what their goals are because they tell us every day, both here in the Middle East, but unfortunately also in the West. So, I would call it cautious optimism. There's still a lot to be seen about this international force. I think there is a concern that once everybody moves on, the news cycle moves on, Hamas will continue to attack Israel, and maybe their military capabilities are significantly weakened, but they have other ways of hurting us. In the international community, with every time we'll have to retaliate against a terrorist attack, we won't hear the end of it from the UN and from the media. So I think there's still a long road ahead of us. But if you would have asked me 2 years ago, if Iran and Hezbollah and all these things that we always grew up as existential threats, because they were, if you would have told me that, they wouldn't necessarily even be in the top list of things to worry about right now, I would have thought it's crazy.
Got about a minute left in this segment, Yale. I want to ask you about the future of Prime Minister Netanyahu. Obviously, you made mention of some of the booing he received in that crowd, but at the same time, he does retain significant political support in Israel, and he obviously is a close friend of President Trump, who's quite popular in Israel right now. There's supposed to be an election next year. What's your prognosis on Netanyahu's political future?
It's really hard to say. I think you said it correctly. A lot of people really support him. A lot of people really have, you say people in the U.S. have Trump derangement syndrome. People here have Bibi derangement syndrome. So it's really hard to tell. I think nobody in their right mind will try to predict anything about Israeli politics. So it's hard to tell. But Scott, if you don't mind, I also want to take a moment to thank you for just being such an incredible ally and friend over these last 2 years. Every time we see you with a hostage pit, it really means the world. And also to all your listeners, I know we have a lot of supporters who aren't Jewish, who are Christian, and they share the same values with us. And, I think I can speak on behalf of all of Israel when I say thank you for making us not feel alone.
Well, thank you for saying that. And it's been... I've been wanting to take that pin off for 2 years, and I think I'm going to take it off tonight at 10 o'clock on CNN for the last time. So, and you and I at one point, we traded pins. And so the pin I'm wearing actually is your pin. And, it's been an honor to have it on my jacket, and I'm going to take it off tonight and put it in a special place, and never forget that. Yael Bartur is our guest. She's in Israel. We're going to take a break and bring her back for a couple of more questions. Before we go to this commercial break, I want to give you a message from our friends at Relief Factor. Boy, are we feeling relief today? We are. And so now we're going to talk about Relief Factor, because I don't think we've had a day where we've had more relief than this one. You've probably seen their commercials where a spouse is saying to his significant other, "You don't understand, the pain is gone." We got a letter from Sharon. She said that's what happened to her. Relief Factor has helped me so much. She plans on taking it for the rest of her life. She's a walking testimonial. You can be part of the Relief Factor revolution. Go out there and get the 3-week quick start today. Visit relieffactor.com. Call 1-800-4RELIEF. That's how you get involved with Relief Factor. You will not regret it. We're using it in the Jennings household. Relieffactor.com or 1-800-4RELIEF. More with Yael Bartur from Israel when we come back. It's Common Sense for the American People. Scott Jennings on the Salem Radio Network.
The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network returns from break in 3 minutes. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 2 minutes and 30 seconds. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 2 minutes. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 1 minute and 30 seconds. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return in 1 minute. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 45 seconds. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 30 seconds. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 15 seconds. The Scott Jennings Show on the Salem Radio Network will return from break in 5 seconds.
Conversations and stories you simply won't hear from the mainstream media. It's the Scott Jennings Show.
It's Monday, October the 13th, a historic day here on the Salem Radio Network. It's the Scott Jennings Show, common sense for the American people. We're talking with my friend Yael Bar-Tur. She's in Israel, born and raised in Israel, lives in the United States. She has a cool podcast called Ask a Jew, which I think you should check out. It's quite entertaining.
You should come on it, Scott.
I got to come on. Now you've done this. Now I got to do that. We'll have to get together on that. And I'm so grateful for you taking the time to chat with us about your experiences in Israel the last few days. We've got the hostages back, and now the peace documents have been signed. Now, we'll see what happens. Hamas has agreed, I guess, to demilitarize, although I'm skeptical of that. You've got all the Arab nations that are now engaged in holding their feet to the fire about what comes next. Do Israelis have confidence in these international agreements and international partnerships? I mean, over the last 20 years, billions upon billions of dollars from around the world went into Gaza. And of course, we know what they used it for. What's sort of the Israeli attitude about the next iteration of rebuilding Gaza and money flowing into that particular area?
Yeah, I think we're very skeptical, unfortunately, by experience. We're all very familiar with the UN peacekeeping, quote unquote, force in Lebanon that, didn't do much aside from retreat every time Hezbollah would attack. So, in Israel, there's a saying here that in order to be a realist, you have to believe in miracles. So, we're hopeful that this time it will work. But there is a lot of skepticism and there is a lot of concern. But, President Trump mentioned today, he said, turns out we do have a lot of friends. And maybe there are Middle Eastern countries or other countries in the region that may not be publicly supportive of Israel for different reasons, but behind the scenes have a vested interest to collaborate with us on security, economics, tourism. Anything can happen.
Reports are coming out of Gaza that rival clans are fighting in some cases with Hamas. Israel took out all of Hamas's top brass during the war. Do you think these rival factions could ultimately topple the Hamas, what's left, I guess, of the Hamas leadership there? What's your view of the internal back and forth in Gaza?
Yeah, it's hard to say. There's a lot of anger at Hamas in the Gaza Strip for obvious reasons, but that anger doesn't necessarily translate to support of Israel, right? So it's really up to. I know this sounds a bit like a cliche, but it's up to the people of Gaza. The people of Israel in the last 2 years have been so united and so fighting so hard for one another. For our hostages, for our right to live here in peace and security. And we really hope that there are people in Gaza who want to do the same.
So in his previous administration, President Trump moved the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem. He put together the Abraham Accords, which I saw a report. They may be expanding. I see other countries now may be ready to sign on. Obviously, he's brokered this peace agreement. The hostages have come home. Is there another American president that has this sort of legacy in Israel or this sort of popular support like President Trump does at this moment?
Yeah, I mean, I've never seen anything like it. The support from him here is huge. The memes that are going through are, absolutely hilarious of just President Trump coming in and fixing everything. And I said this in the beginning, but I'll say it again. These are not people that are necessarily members of the Israeli right. These are people, a lot of them consider themselves liberal, left-wing, but they give Trump credit where credit's due. And I think, like I said, he will go down in history books in this country.
That voice you're hearing today is that of Yael Bar-Tur, my friend who's in Israel. She's been there for the last several days. We thank you, Yael, for your time. If you want to find her on X, which I highly recommend, she has amazing images from Israel for the last few days. You go to Yael, Y-A-E-L, the letter B and the letter T, Y-A-E-L, the letter B, the letter T, and you can find her on the X platform. Her podcast is called Ask a Jew. Yael, thank you so much for your time today. Congratulations to you and to all Israelis for these hostages coming home. Thank you for your work with the hostage families. Thank you for keeping the faith. And honestly, thank you for being a good friend to me over the last few months. And I appreciate our friendship and appreciate our ongoing conversation. And I look forward to hopping on that podcast with you soon. You've been listening to Common Sense for the American People. It's Scott Jennings, live from your nation's capital on a historic day, a day we've been waiting for over 2 years. Join us again tomorrow right here on the Salem Radio Network.
The voice of reason, common sense for the American people. This is the Scott Jennings Show.